Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, journeys of descending into the mysteries and rising from the roots. I am your host, Lisa Hillier, spiritual mentor and priestess. I guide women through my one-to-one mentorship, online courses, and Patreon portal into the mysteries within them to rise rooted into their sovereign selves. And today I have Rama on the show with me. Rama is an artist, an alchemical astrologer, cosmic high priestess, herbalist, grid keeper, pilgrimage steward, sound healer, yogic scientist, and the creatrix of the podcast, Stars, Stones, and Stories. She has studied the art of star keeping for over 28 years and holds an MA in cultural astronomy and astrology, with merit through the Sophia Center at the University of Wales. This episode is full of so much magic. Can't wait to sink in with you. Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast, and I am here with Rama. Welcome, Rama. And to start, we're going to start with the question of what has been the journey that has led you to the work that you're offering the world today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me here on your amazing podcast. And it's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the simplest response for me is one memory that I go back to again and again. And it was around 1988. I was living in Bitburg, Germany, and I was 8, 8-ish, and, around the harmonic convergence. And my mother had just found out that my uncle was diagnosed with AIDS. And I remember how profound that time was because she went into a pretty deep grief process and started educating herself in so many different capacities. And it really opened her up to her own spiritual awakening. And so I simultaneously was affected by that. And because of that awakening she had, I really grew up using herbal medicine and, right use of essential oils and working with the tarot and studying astrology. And both my parents on the side became hypnotherapists. I mean, I just really emerged in this kind of new age culture as I was going through my late adolescence into my teenage years. And without that part of my life, I don't think I would be offering the work in the world in the way that I do, had I not witnessed her go through such a powerful transformation that, as I think we all know, when we go through transformation, it's not always light and bright. There's usually a lot of layers that get stripped away and a lot of death and grief. And that was a huge part of my mom's journey that I was witnessing through my adolescence and teenage years.
I love that death and grief that we go through on this journey, because I think that's part of the conditioning of our culture to kind of not really go into the grief, not really to go into the heartbreak or the pain or all of that, but it's such a portal into the depths of love that we can hold, like the capacity of love that we can hold in our life. So it's a really potent place that I know for most of my life I avoided until recently. And then when you go in, it's like, whoa, like there's such a different experience in that place. And it's a eclipse tomorrow. This episode won't come out for a couple weeks, but so it might be interesting for people listening to be able to reflect back from a couple weeks from now, or when this episode is released, to what like shifted for them in the eclipse. So can you speak to what an eclipse is? And then also like your path is so integrated with the priestess, with astrology,
Mm-hmm.
Egypt, all that kind of medicine. But let's start with what is an eclipse, what's kind of taking place in this portal that we're recording this episode in.
Yeah, it's a great way to begin because eclipses bring massive endings and bright new beginnings simultaneously. And we have the moment of the eclipse, like for instance, with this lunar, it's a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus, conjunct the North Node in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus. So this particular eclipse we have coming up has a very special flavor to it. And the totality of the eclipse will go from about 3 to 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's the moment of the eclipse, so to speak. But eclipses always come in pairs, and sometimes they come in a series of 3. So I like to call them eclipse portals because they are a portal. And as they enter in as a pair, there's this element of time bending that really happens with the eclipse. And it's something I talk a lot about in my work, is this concept of time bending, because I think a lot of people think, oh, a solar eclipse, it's new beginnings, and a lunar eclipse, it's closure, but they can flip-flop and they can feed into one another. So there's just this folding of time and expansion of time that really happens in these eclipse portals. And what happens when you have an eclipse is that the light of the sun or the moon is blotted out for a time, which sometimes the exact alignment of that can be about an hour. And when we look to ancient indigenous cultures, eclipses were seen as very sacred and they were held in high regard, meaning people were very respectful of the exact alignment of the eclipses and would often kind of be indoors or in some sort of shelter in prayer, in ritual, in ceremony for the duration of the eclipse. Because they are wild card events, sometimes extreme things can happen and we can't really prepare for what will happen in an eclipse portal. But they're very significant and they're important to watch in our lives because they will open up and close new cycles. And those cycles are usually in multiples of 9s, because the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, they're always across from each other on the zodiacal wheel. And they move in this series, like you will have a nodal return approximately every 18 years. But then we have a reverse nodal return as well. So the North Node speaks to our collective dharma and destiny, and the South Node speaks to our gifts and talents and what we're letting go of. And we can find this wisdom within our own natal charts, our birth charts, which is like the blueprint of who we are. And we can find this in the collective astrology as well. So we've had the North Node in Taurus this year. And it's really offering us this opportunity on a personal level and a collective level to become more aligned with our value system, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is goddess of love and culture and beauty. Venus, as this elder sister to Earth, really wants to bestow upon us that reminder that how we spend our sacred time and attention in our lives is our value system. So it is important that we do the things that we love, that we live in our joy and our pleasure. And for many of us in the world, we've been asked to dynamically shift our lives, and we will continue to be asked to dynamically shift our lives to support our value systems instead of supporting corporate structures or other kind of overculture structures that don't actually align with our values. So these particular eclipses that we are experiencing in 2022 and in the first half of 2023 are really aligning us in that particular way, especially this fall, as the North Node and Uranus and the full moon with tomorrow's eclipse all come to align in one marriage, in one unification. And Uranus and Taurus is so important to our current astrology. I've been talking about Uranus for so many years in Taurus because, again, it is sudden shifting and change, and we're seeing it globally through our economic currencies and the economic world. And there's just a lot we don't know, and we're not meant to know. We're meant to, again, continue to align with our value system and to create more beauty and more pleasure and more art in the world that we can be really proud of and we can celebrate as humans. Which for many, that feels a little counterintuitive to them these days, but that's really what I see as the way through kind of the chaos of these times.
Yeah. Can you speak to Uranus and what that does for each of us, the planet? I am 42. I'll be 43 in December. And, growing up, I always heard of midlife crises. Yeah. And I was like, but it was more like men that would have the midlife crisis, right? So I never knew it was a thing.
It's a thing.
And, it's a huge thing.
I'm in it too.
And one of my friends who is an astrologer, she's like, oh, you're going through these transits. You went through a Uranus transit, I think a Neptune. And then I come up to a Uranus square on my 43rd birthday. And then I think it's...
Wait, you mean Pluto square?
Was it Pluto square? I don't know.
Well, Uranus, we do the opposition with Uranus. We do a Pluto square Pluto and a Neptune square Neptune.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, midlife crisis is a real thing. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Can you, speak to the transits that we go through? Uranus?
I'm so passionate about this topic. I like to call them midlife activation points instead of midlife crisis, because that's really what they're doing. They're activating us. So a lot of people know about the Saturn return, which is the way that I see it astrologically. It's like when we actually become an adult. Culture says you're an adult at 18 or 21 or whatever the age is. For astrology, it's really through the Saturn return that you've become a full-fledged adult. And then we go through these midlife activation points, which it depends on one's generation. Many people experience the Uranus opposition first, and then they go through Neptune square Neptune and Pluto square Pluto. My little section of when I was born, we experienced Pluto square Pluto first, Neptune square Neptune first, and I will be in the exact alignment of my Uranus opposition next summer. So it all really depends upon the degrees, so we can't generalize and say, oh, at 40 or 42, because these outer planets, they go retrograde every year for about 6 months. So, and they have different orbs, elliptical orbs, Pluto, so there's different ways to break it down. But essentially what is happening is that Neptune comes in to provide this big kind of fog and cloud so that you almost lose your complete identity. And it can be very disorienting, particularly for people who have been on a spiritual path for a long time, because you get so kind of like clouded with this Neptunian fog. And it's an opportunity to not really be able to see the forest through the trees, to deepen your faith and your trust and who you come out as on the other side. It can vary. Some people will completely shift their whole outlook. Some people will just anchor in even deeper to the practices they had. There's a real kind of dark night of the soul that can happen through that. And then with the Pluto square Pluto, it's a dynamic around power and transformation and being able to claim your power and own your power. That is hopefully what one, experiences through the initiation. And then with the Uranus opposition, we have this rising, this ascent of the Kundalini frequency. So the reason why we've seen it so attached to men, like the midlife crisis, is because for the majority of men, they've kind of lived their lives in their lower chakras. And then what happens as the Uranus opposition comes through their physical body, which is why I love astrology, because we can have these ancient wise souls, and we can have journeyed through so many different lifetimes and even be able to access that wisdom in this lifetime. However, our physical bodies also matter. They are our temples in these lifetimes, and so your physical body has to go through these initiations. And that is what is also happening, especially, I think, with the Uranus opposition, because it is this ascent of the Kundalini. And like someone like myself, I've been a yogic practitioner since I was a teenager and studied intense Kundalini yoga. And I've been working with my Kundalini, but even with that history, when I experience the exact alignment of my Uranus opposition, there will still be a differentiation and a rise and a sensation I will have never felt or known before, because there's a time coding with the astrology. So what happens for a lot of men is they've been living in those lower chakras. And then for the first time ever, the Kundalini really rises into the heart. And it's like so deeply profound. So if a man is not really conscious of that stirring, then he can go more deeper into like sexual exploration. And that's why society has said, men at midlife crisis buy the red car and go cheat on their wives. But that it doesn't have to go down that way, And then for women, because at least how we've experienced culture thus far here on earth, a lot of girls have been raised to just be very kind and please everyone and take care of everyone else. So, women have been indoctrinated over and over again to be in their hearts. So with the Uranus opposition, the frequency rises into the throat. And this is why so many women, once they get to their 40s, they don't give a fuck, they're just like speaking their truth. And sometimes it can be really intense at first for some women because they've not done a lot of practices to open their throat. So the Uranus opposition is so significant and so powerful. And Uranus as a planetary whole, it's a higher octave of Mercury. So it is here to bestow, I like to consider it like thought packages, like concepts, genius solutions that almost like they come from the future. Uranus is associated with the planet, the sign Aquarius. In contemporary astrology, I work with both contemporary and ancient. So ancient astrology would put Aquarius with Saturn. However, when we consider Uranus as this kind of future bearer, bringing in so much wisdom from the future that is like these genius solutions that can help us for these times, how to think outside the box, how to push boundaries, how to be rebellious, how to make drastic change. And it is a planet that works very much with the frequency of lightning. So when we have a lot of Uranian activation, sometimes we can see a lot of lightning happening or electricity. We have to be very cautious with electricity. We just, in general, when we've got strong Uranian energy working through us personally or collectively, we want to be more grounded. We want to take our time. We want to be more cautious driving heavy machinery, all of those things. But more than not, it's bringing a lot of radical change, which is very exciting. And so with that, one thing that is really important as we go through a Uranus opposition, or like on a day like tomorrow, as we're building to this eclipse, which we're going to feel the effects of this eclipse. We're already in it, and we're going to feel it as we enter into the Sagittarius new moon. So it is an overarching kind of transit we're experiencing. And it's really important to do nervous system work. So things to help regulate the nervous system, drinking lots of water, taking time to meditate, or place your bare hands and bare feet on the earth, other sorts of practices, anything to just help keep the nervous system calm and expansive, like relaxed and expansive. That's super, super important for Uranian energy.
Beautiful. And, with this, I love that you called it a midlife activation. I think those were the words, because it's an initiation.
Yeah,
for sure. When you spoke to, your Saturn return being when you actually become an adult, there's so much truth in that. I just think of my daughter when she was 18 and now she's 21, and it's like, she's not an adult yet, but society deems her one.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just, I wish that we could kind of spread the good word on that more, because young people have so much pressure on them to know and have it all figured out. And when I think back to my 22-year-old self, like I was a baby, like I was just starting to realize how little I knew about myself at that age. I was just like, wow, I really don't know myself yet. And so I think it's really important that we can kind of take that pressure to have it all figured out, to know what our purpose is and what we're supposed to do in the world. And one thing I didn't culminate with that is really important to wrap that kind of midlife activation piece up is that the cherry on top is the Chiron return. So that is like you're doing that work with Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. And then around the age of 50, 52, give or take, one experiences the Chiron return, which I'm not going to speak in depth at this time because that could be a whole, podcast. But what I will say is that what I have experienced so much in sitting with the many, many people I have through astrological divination, the Chiron return is when we fully embody our medicine. And it's like, even if we've been on the path and we've been really devoted and we've been doing all the things, there's just something about that alignment that you're really like anchored and embodied and able to offer your gifts to the world in this very beautiful kind of seasoned way. And again, I think if we knew that and we could take the pressure off saying, oh my gosh, like I don't have to be an expert at the age of 45. Like, it's like you can really, and it doesn't mean you can't shine earlier in life. You can, and some people will just because of their particular time coding. But I think your average human is not really ready to fully offer their gifts to the world until they reach 50.
That feels like that awareness that is going to take place and you're going to fully stand in your gifts around 50, that awareness that you're going to go through some transits in your early 40s that are going to shake things up in a really powerful way, being kind of on the other side of these big transits. I've sat with, I'm like, I wish people knew about this, so that I wish I knew about it going in so that I could have better prepared myself, for lack of better words, to be really anchored in my self, in my relationship with God, with Goddess, with, nervous system regulation, so that I could have a strong foundation moving through these transits. And I've been on this path for quite some time. And so I thought I had that. And then these transits came and I was like, holy shit, this is a whole, this is a whole nother level. So for people listening, knowing when they're going to happen in your specific chart is so powerful. And that awareness, and how can I support myself in this? What can be my anchor? Does anything come to mind for you on what are powerful anchors to move through these transits?
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely working with an astrologer that can help you know when they are, like the exact alignments, is really beneficial. And I also think having practices in place that support you, and we're all going to have different needs in that realm, but like, you know, when I say practices, it could be daily meditation, walking, I think is really a beautiful practice that a lot of people overlook. And when we walk, especially when our hands are free, like I say that because I see a lot of people these days walking and typing on their phones simultaneously. But when we're walking and our hands are free and there's a light swing of the arms, it balances the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So it's super calming for the nervous system and very grounding. And so something like that, you know, just having a practice of eating really nourishing foods and staying hydrated. I mean, the basics, you know, good rest, like good sleep patterns. These are the things that help get us through these transits. There will be times where journaling is important, or for some people, going to a therapist will be important, you know, depending on if their 12th house or 4th house or 8th house is getting really shaken awake. Those are good times to have a good therapist that you can connect with. And any other kind of support measures, you know, everyone's going to be a little bit different, but like I get regular acupuncture, and it's like, it just helps my body work all this energy as it shifts and evolves. So
Yeah.
those are some of my favorite ways.
Yeah. And I think just that knowing that it's happening for your greater good. It's part of divine will.
Absolutely.
It's a natural occurrence. I resisted mine so much because I didn't understand what was happening. And so almost that ultimate surrender to it is very powerful.
Yeah, these outer planets, they don't mess around, you know, like they will force you to surrender.
Yep.
It's inevitable.
Yes.
Yeah. There's kind of this aspect of like the meat tenderizer and being tenderized. Or, you know, I used to live in LA, and we had such a great amount of Korean spas there. It's the one thing I miss about living in Los Angeles. And have you ever been to a Korean spa?
No.
Okay, because I think there's at least one in Vancouver. Anyways, when they put on these mitts, and they're these really powerful exfoliators, and the women just scrub you down. And I hope this doesn't sound too gross, but you can literally like look over your arm and see like chunks of skin getting like sloughed off. It is amazing. It's the best feeling ever. Like you feel like a newborn baby afterwards. And I have the mitts myself, and I do it at home, but there's nothing like having the women do it, because I mean, it's about a 30-40 minute process, and they scrub you everywhere, like all the parts. And it's like that, like that's what these outer planets do. They're just gonna like slough off any part of you that is not real or pure or true to your essence. They help to bring you back to that. And I want to say there's always an element of free will. So the more you participate in the surrendering process and allow the energy, the more that gets sloughed off. You know, when we really resist, if we go into deep addiction or denial, or we abuse our power, or, you know, we mismanage our kundalini, that's also a choice. And we can see the effects, you know, in the culture of people who make those choices, and they usually don't come out looking so good on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's a choice. We can choose to surrender to it, or we can choose to fight against it.
And that Neptune piece, like where I was speaking about the addiction or like being in denial, that's a super important piece in our collective right now, because we've had Neptune in Pisces since 2012. And Neptune will be making a shift. I think it's like 2026, which also is when Uranus will be shifting from Taurus to Gemini. So that's going to be a massive year. There's going to be so much transforming because these outer planets will all be in air and fire signs. Whereas for the majority of our lives, they've been in earth and water signs. And so collectively, we're going to see the increase in technology is going to go through the roof by 2026. And so we need to be prepared for that now, meaning like the nervous system piece is so key, because the more we're on technology, the more sensitive our nervous systems become. So now is the time to really, regulate our nervous systems. And with Neptune in Pisces, for such a long time, we've seen a lot of collective abuse and denial and addictions. And so that's why that's been so prominent. And hopefully we'll start to awaken out of that in the collective. But it's also up to each one of us and the choices we make in our own individual lives.
Yeah. So we can see that we're going through a huge shift on the planet. Yes. Collectively right now, a massive awakening, we'll call it, shake up.
Yeah, it's an awakening. It sounds cliche, but it's an awakening. And all of the 2020s are just packed. And I've been, sharing with people who follow me for years. I'm like, we're in a marathon. So pace yourself. This is not a race in the sense of it's not a sprint, So we have to take time for our self-care and really rest our bodies and know that this is a long distance journey and game.
Yeah. Where do you see us going with it all?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, honestly, I'm an eternal optimist. And I do believe there will be a massive shift in the collective consciousness. That being said, the last few years on some levels have been pretty shocking for me in the sense that I never imagined raising my daughter in a time of such kind of great collective darkness and confusion and just a lot of splits in the collective. Like there's just been a lot of pitting people against people, and that divide and conquer tactic, it is ancient. And it just seems as humans, we continue to play that game over and over again. I do believe that we have the possibility to really rise out of that. But there are a lot of options and choices. And we are really in the Aquarian age right now. And there is a dark side to the Aquarian age, which is kind of the over-reliance on technology and giving away all of our information through, artificial intelligence. And there's so many possibilities. And I'm a very multidimensional person, so I kind of see many possibilities simultaneously. And for me, I always aim for the highest timeline. So that's where I am. And I just keep holding that. And in that, there really is like a golden age consciousness that is emerging out of this time we're living in now, where there's still a lot of things that have to be collectively shed, and there's still things that need to be grieved and witnessed and honored for what happened. And so, every day we're kind of living in a paradox because there's a great expansion and a great contraction happening. But I really do believe that we very much could be living in a time where in our generation, we will see more and more people really living in harmony with the earth and really treating one another with that kind of sisterhood, brotherhoodly, altruistic connection, and where we're really more in service to the collective and not just our bank accounts. So we'll see how it all shapes up.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. It would be a great movie, if we
Well,
could
it
just
kind of
push
is a
pause.
movie,
Totally.
we're the stars. I mean,
Yeah.
I really do feel that. I feel that I feel like it's such a blessing to be on the earth at this time. And
Mm.
I really do feel like this is like, out of all the places in the galaxies, this is one of the most exciting places to be. And it's real easy to feel overwhelmed or kind of like, oh, like it's so hard. But I think that there's infinite support there for us
Yeah.
from the other world. And the more we can attune to that support, the stronger we'll feel, and the more kind of those Uranian genius solutions, we can harness them and we can learn how to apply them into
Mm.
our day-to-day lives so that we can solve some of these perceived crises, because I think a lot of our global culture is telling us that we're running out of resources, and it's kind of like the 11th hour on earth. And I do think on some level that's very true. But I also, when I look to the earth, I mean, I was just digging in my garden this morning because I recently moved homes and I transplanted a bunch of fruit bearing bushes and trees and plants yesterday and this morning. I had to get them in the ground
Mm.
because of daylight savings time. It went dark so early and I couldn't see what I was digging. So anyways, I got up first thing in the morning and I'm like digging in the yard, and it's like the soil here in Appalachia, it's kind of weird. It's a lot of it is this red clay and it's not the best for growing conditions. But I'm like digging in my yard, my new yard, and finding all of these beautiful little worms. And that's always a good sign that you've got fertile soil, and I'm just like, the birds are singing, there's all sorts of, creatures out and about. Like the earth is pretty fertile and resilient. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that we haven't pushed the envelope many times, because we have as humans, but I think the more we can believe in that truth and align with that and really reestablish a mutual reciprocity with Mother Earth, the more
Mm.
we can find that the solutions are here for us, and they always have been. They're not that far, they're not that far removed from our consciousness.
Yeah. It's like that, seeing what is actually in front of our face or beneath our
Mm-hmm.
feet, as
Yeah.
opposed to the narratives that
Yeah.
are out in technology. When you look at the earth, at the soil, and connect with that, we can see how abundant and fertile. And when we appreciate that and connect with that,
Mm-hmm.
it ultimately amplifies and grows. So I am an eternal optimist as well. I think we're going somewhere incredibly beautiful, but I also do believe that there'll be simultaneous, like different timelines existing at one
Mm-hmm.
time, which we're already seeing, so there'll be
Totally.
humans having one experience and then humans having a completely different experience, and it can all coexist. We get to choose
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
which timeline we're riding and where we're going.
Yeah. It's like the choose your own adventure books. Did you read
Yes.
those growing up?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to love those so much. I mean, that's basically what life is,
Yeah. Yeah. We get to choose our adventure. So
Yeah.
with let's speak to Egypt, or can you speak to
Yeah.
Egypt and the pilgrimages that you facilitate? And I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure you've been to Avalon. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It actually all began in Avalon for me.
Mm.
Yeah. I made my first pilgrimage to Avalon in 2003, and it was on a really beautiful, it was a really beautiful journey hosted by this woman, Shauna Carroll, who is a sacred chant goddess artist who transitioned, I think, about 4 years ago or so. And it was so powerful because we learned a lot of chants and we got to perform at the opening of the Glastonbury Goddess Conference and sing in a choir with local women from Glastonbury. And that journey just opened me up on so many levels. And I continued to travel to Avalon off and on through the early 2000s. And it was about 2015, and I was feeling a call to consider leading a pilgrimage there. And things started to align so that in 2017, I brought my first pilgrimage to Glastonbury. And we also went down to Cornwall as well. And so that opened the door for these pilgrimages. And I've also stewarded pilgrimages in the south of France as well. And in 2018, I made my first journey to Egypt. I was supposed to go in 2001 with a shamanic teacher I had been studying with him and his wife, Henk Vesselman. But things just didn't align. And I knew it wasn't my time to go. And I knew I wasn't meant to force it as much as I wanted to go with them. And so that concept of going to Egypt just kind of went on the back burner. And it was around the end of 2017 where I knew it was time to get to Egypt. In fact, when I went to Avalon in 2016, the year before I led my first pilgrimage there, I was in this amazing jewelry shop called Stone Age, which people who have been to Glastonbury will know Stone Age. Louis is an icon for sure. And he actually was he's the owner of the shop, and he was walking in the door and he said something, and I turned around and him and I were both in the doorway, and he had this large piece of Libyan gold tektite on. And I was just drawn into that because I work with Taoist stone medicine, and I've been into stone since I was a child. And when my previous husband and I, when we were getting to know each other, we got to know each other by going to dig stones up from the earth. We traveled all over the West Coast and the East Coast digging stones.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I was so drawn into this Libyan gold tektite, and I was just like, what is that? And he was like, it's Libyan gold tektite. And he was like, there's a whole case over there. And he pointed, and I turned and I went to the case, and I just stood there for almost 2 hours. And there was this particular ring I ended up purchasing, and it was the largest investment I had ever made on a piece of jewelry for myself. I normally don't, at that point, I had never even really bought jewelry for myself. And so I just was like, am I going to do this or not? And the ring kept telling me, I'm going to bring you to Egypt. And I was just like, okay. And so anyways, in 2018, I went to Egypt for the first time, and I was on a journey with a group of other women. And when I went, literally right before my first journey there, I had been working with my mentor, Elder Malidoma Somé, and I had been through this powerful elemental immersion. And so my senses were very, very peaked. And when I arrived in Egypt, I had this immense connection, as soon as I got there, to the elementals of the land. And it was really shocking. I wasn't expecting that. I thought I was going for the temples or whatever, all the things we think of, the pyramids, which that also happened. But for me, it was really just feeling this hug from the land and the spirits of the land. So in that journey, I realized so much got awoken within me. And I realized that part of my work was to continue to travel to Egypt and to start to bring groups there. And honestly, it was not in my consciousness before I went. I had been leading pilgrimages, and I didn't go thinking, oh, I'm going to start bringing groups here. That was not my intention at all. it was actually kind of disorienting because the land opened up to me on such a deep level. And it was towards the end of that journey, we were in the very last temple, the Temple of Philae, which is the Isis temple in Aswan, which is in South Egypt, known as Upper Egypt. And that temple opened so much for me. I had like so many different past life awakenings in that temple in the course of the few hours we were there. And it was interesting because it was like the last temple we went to, and all along, I mean, you know, I was connecting with the temples and they were beautiful and it was amazing to be there, but nothing really shook me as much as that Isis temple at the Temple of Philae. And I just had so many deep awarenesses to like what had happened, particularly with the goddess culture, and how, you know, at one time Egypt was very much honoring the divine feminine and the divine masculine hand in hand. And I would say absolutely that still happens to this day on a certain level. And Egypt just represents so many concepts around duality, light and dark, and yin and yang, and masculine and feminine, Isis and Horus, or Isis and Osiris, or, you know, there's so many pairs of things we see. And I do think that the land of Egypt, of Kemet, is so key to where we are in humanity at this time and what we are working to kind of retrieve and remember about our power and our potential as human beings, and this like love vibration that we're really meant to live within and trust within. And when you walk through the temples, you feel that remembrance because it is so clear that they were built with so much love. So there's so much one can say about these journeys. Are there other particular like inquiries or things that fascinate you or that you would like to explore?
Well, that's beautiful. My journey, like kind of going into the goddess culture and medicine, started in Avalon as well. And it's interesting. I was close to Egypt. I was in Israel and we got really close to the border of Egypt, but it was like, it's not safe to go. It's not safe to go. So I didn't go. But Egypt has been calling more and more. I did a journey with Atlantis and a twin flame kind of thing, and where the separation happened. And it just feels like Atlantis and Egypt, there's such a strong connection there. And we were pharaohs in a previous life and all this kind of magic around Egypt. And it's just interesting or fascinating. We can use so many words around it with Egypt and how it's so protected and, you know, almost like militant to get into what, because of the sacredness and the energy that it does hold. So I feel like there's a deep call for a lot of people to go to these sacred places to remember us, ultimately to remember their truth. Because when we're walking on this planet deep in our truth, the confusion isn't there, and the pull into different narratives and inversions and all of that kind of stuff, we're pretty solid in our truth and remembering who we are. So there's such magic and medicine in those sacred lands, and the wisdom that they hold for us, or the remembering.
Yeah. The remembering, I think, is so huge and key. And I will say, you know, traveling there these days, it can be pretty disorienting. And I think it's important people know that. And if they do choose to go to Egypt, that they're very, very selective about who they go with and make sure that it is a sacred container, like a truly sacred container, because there's a lot of buzzwords that are being thrown out by, different people in the collective. And ultimately, like, who your Egyptian contact is everything, that's key. Because I do think Egypt has so much power for our present moment and our future moment. And I think that there are various powers that try to sway the energy and affect what people can do and can't do in these sacred sites. And so when one travels there, you're kind of like a Jedi getting into the sacred places and having these experiences in a particular way. It's very key to how you can access the energy that has been installed for us at these times, so to speak. So it's also very fun traveling there. It's fun, it's intense, it's unlike anywhere you can go in the world. It's like people don't really know until they've had the experience of being there on the land. And I love it so much. And every time it's like opening a book, like you just don't know, I think of the never ending story. You just don't know what page you're going to turn to and what portion of the story is going to come alive. And it is very much the land of magic. And that's why I always caution people when they are being called to travel there that they use discernment, because as it is the land of magic, you want to make sure you've got some strong people on your team who know how to maneuver various magical paths, because not every being there is going to have the highest and best for the group, right? So that part's really key. And I do believe it's important that people who have a call to Egypt are going at this time, because there is something really significant to experience and receive from the land. And like being in these places, it is so profoundly healing. I mean, being in the Great Pyramid, literally, it is a healing chamber. And so what you can experience and the spaces and places you can go to are so vast. And I do believe like complete miracles are available for people who enter in the Great Pyramid with reverence and with the greatest respect.
I love that. I know when I went to India, I was in Goa doing a yoga teacher training. And then I went up to Varanasi and my teacher was like, be careful up there. There's a lot of dark magic. And I didn't know what he meant until I experienced it. And that's what I really received around what you spoke to around Egypt. There's always inversions, we'll call them, or people that are not
distortion timelines. I like to call them that. Malidoma, he would call them the forces of adversity, and how they're kind of there to trick us, but also I think to help us reclaim our power more and more too. I don't think it's something we need to be afraid of, just aware of. And bringing that consciousness into light. But it's a thing. It's a real thing in Egypt, and it is in India as well. And I think it's important for Westerners to hear that, because the way magic works in our culture is very different. It's still there, but it's different. And so people, if they haven't been initiated, they just don't know, and they don't know how to protect themselves if they don't know.
So going in kind of with protective, energetic boundaries, discernment is very helpful. And also in my experience, Avalon and India, they're awakeners in a sense as well. And there'll be some destruction in that. And so that surrendering to it is very powerful, very, very powerful.
Totally. Yeah, no, this work is not for the faint of heart. It's all about deep transformation. And Avalon, definitely has that, it has that darkness, just like the light, and it's a death portal as well.
Yeah.
When you really access that energy, you can feel it.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have a story of synchronicity around your daughter and Egypt that you want to share?
Well, I was just in Egypt with my daughter this
Oh, wow.
past June. Yeah, we went, I brought a group of women and my daughter came with. It was the first time she had traveled with to Egypt. She's been with me on pilgrimage in Avalon before. I think really what stands out the most for me, just like being on the land with her, was just this total recognition that her and I have traveled together for many, many lifetimes. And I've always felt that since she was quite young, like a baby,
Mhm.
like in my womb, so to speak. Yeah, but you don't know, you never know how your child is going to do in a situation until they're in it. And because Egypt has that intensity, I wasn't sure, how well she would do on the land and if she would even like it. Like I thought, oh my gosh, she might get there and, want to go home. But just being with her and seeing her strength and her resilience confirmed that what our work is in this lifetime together. Like I could really see that come to life and come to light. And she's definitely been my greatest teacher on the path, like on every level possible. And I had an experience with her the day before her first birthday where she almost left her body in my arms. She turned limp and gray. And there was a moment where I was considering calling 911 to have support. And I just, as a mother, I was assessing the situation, but my nervous system and my higher self kept saying, like, they were telling me what to do, and how to guide her through it and how to hold the space. And I was being shown that if I called in external support, it would create all of this chaos that would be too much energy for her, that it could actually send her out of her body, out of the fear of that. And so it was a real intense moment where, my left brain was saying, well, this is what you should be doing. But my intuition was like, follow this instead. And so I followed my intuition and she came to and she was fine. And it was definitely, I mean, for any mother, I think we all struggle with the fear of losing our children. Like, I think it's a really natural thing to like have a great fear that your child is going to die, because it's kind of what we think of, the most unnatural thing is for the child to die before the parent. So it's one thing to like have that fear, but it's another thing to really feel that you're that close to that possibility. And that, I mean, when we get to those edges, I think of them as synchronicities, because something happens when we get so close to the veil, everything expands and it's like time slows down and you're just in between the veils. I don't know how else to explain it, but I'm sure you know exactly what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. That being between the veils. And that's what Avalon just feels like you're in a different realm. You're closest to God, to Goddess. Like everything is so palpable and can be felt and experienced. So that between the veils is such a potent place to be in.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share a quick story about that?
Yeah. Share, please.
I had the honor of, I wasn't there the exact moment my grandmother took her last breath, but I walked into the room probably like 3 minutes later. I'd been driving up from Florida to get to Asheville. And I could feel she was leaving. Like I knew consciously she was leaving her body, but I could feel her as I was making that drive. It's about a 9-hour drive. And like I was psychically speaking with her through the ethers. And I was like, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Like 1 more hour, just please hang on. And anyways, like I said, it had probably been about 3 minutes after she had physically left her body when I arrived, and I walked into the hospice room, and I'll never forget just like the door and like the energy of the door. Like I really felt like when that door was opened, I walked into a whole other portal, and her body was glowing. She was so beautiful. Literally, I watched her because my mother and my aunt and we massaged her body and we sang to her for about an hour at beginning around that time. And I watched her body, like the wrinkles faded off of her face. She became a little more small, and this like glow just emitted all around her. It was the most sacred, holy experience. And it's so interesting because our cultures quite often really cut us off from death and that experience of being with our loved ones when they actually make the transition. And it's very much like life. Like I've also been a birth and a postpartum doula, and I've seen many women give birth, and something happens when that baby is getting so close to crowning and being pushed out that like the atmosphere in the room shifts. Even if you're in a hospital and everything's beeping and loud, you can still feel it if you're attuned. And for me, that's really this whole concept when we talk about the veils and beyond the veils. It is very palpable. And the season we're in right now, the season of Samhain for us in the Northern Hemisphere, is a time of the thinning of the veils. And with this also simultaneously being an eclipse portal, it's more peaked than ever before in many, many years. And I think it's important for us to know that we just have a lot of power right now to really connect with our departed ones and our guides and our guardians and whatever other beings we work with at this time.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful to acknowledge the sacredness of death and how it's such a initiation for our loved ones that pass. It's something really beautiful and painful, of course.
Yeah.
But there's like a graduation. I remember when I was in India, that was the term that they used. It's a graduation for our loved ones that are passing. And our culture we're so separate from it. So just hearing that story is so beautiful as your loved one transitions. And it was such a beautiful portal. And the veils are thin right now, and we can feel it. And so that communion with the ancestors is so powerful. Do you want to speak to the dragon currents, and what are the dragon currents? Who are the dragons, and how are they with us, always?
Yeah. I mean, the dragons are a bit of mystery for us in our human incarnations. And I do believe dragons are real, and we can look to many cultures where we can find that dragon frequency. The Taoists work with the dragons a lot. The Vedas speak about the dragon energy. I mean, that's what the nodes of the eclipse are. The north node is the dragon's head. The south node is the dragon's tail. And as we look to like Celtic Europe, there's a deep knowingness of the dragon lines of the body, the earth's body, which can also be called the fairy lines. So I do believe that dragons help to protect and um, keep the continuity of sovereignty alive throughout time and space. And so I think different planetary systems have different dragons. And I believe there are dragons of directions, like dragons of the east and the west and the south and the north. But I think one of the easiest ways to explain kind of like dragon currents is just imagining like our bodies have these different meridians where there's intersections of energy. And we can see that through the chakra system. We can see it through the practice of Ayurveda and acupuncture. Western medicine hasn't really awoken to this, but I do believe will be soon. I think it's inevitable for this kind of unity consciousness to come back into being, as we were speaking about this possibility of like this golden age resurfacing for us here on earth. And so with that, the meridians of our body are a mirror for the meridians of the earth's body, and these are ley lines. And we have particular intersections of the ley lines at sacred sites. And so, you know, we can look to Avalon as being the heart chakra of the earth. We can look to Egypt as being the throat chakra of the earth, and so on. You know, there are various sites around the world. And so the dragons help to steward those spaces to keep the energy clear, so to speak. And I also believe, you know, if people are so inclined, I do believe every human has access to their own personal dragon as well. And I think dragon medicine is really helpful for the times we live in, because there are many people that are still kind of working out like, what is discernment, or what is truth, or what is sovereignty? And connecting with dragons help to realign to that consciousness of something that is pure and goes beyond the ages, that goes beyond egoic matter and opinions. So the dragons help to really, I would say, maintain the energies, the subtle energies that then kind of create the foundation, the network foundation for creation, really.
Yeah, I really love that, that each human has their dragon ally. And when I was doing my priestess training, we did a journey to meet our dragon. And it was one of my most profound experiences, because I was sitting in my bedroom. I didn't live where I live now, but I was sitting in my bedroom listening to one of my teachers guide me, Amaya, into meeting my dragon. And tears were streaming, like pouring, flooding out of my eyes as I'm meeting this dragon, where it was so beyond this physical realm, like this remembering that I just can't even put words to in this life. Like, it was like I was crying, and there was such a remembering and a union with this dragon that me as a human person I have no recollection of that, but in this other realm, it was so natural, you know? So it's weird even putting words to it, but it's like that ally and support is so huge right now. Just even the ancestors or the dragons or however it shows up for everybody, so that we don't feel alone in this chaos. It can feel like chaos at times.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's a support and a remembering again, and a remembering.
Yeah. And a protection too. Like, you know, if I'm driving sometimes, and if I feel like I need extra protection, you know, I might call in that dragon support. Or I traveled to Egypt in 2020, in December of 2020. 2020, my vision was to bring a large pilgrimage. And that didn't happen because of all of the lockdowns, but I found a way to go on my own because it was the Great Conjunction. And I was like, I just knew I had to be on the land there no matter what. But it was very weird, traveling at that time. And so definitely I was holding like a whole legion of dragons with me as I was flying, because I was just like, I really feel like I need the extra support right now. And I had a layover in Amsterdam, and it felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. Like there were people in these like total white, crazy spacesuits. And I mean, it was bizarre.
Yeah, I can't imagine. You need all your dragons holding you going through that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What's been your biggest lesson along the way?
My biggest lesson along the way. Well, I think that would come to this ability to really trust, and to trust that everything is going to be held and that everything is covered. When I was in the pyramid the first time, I really had a powerful journey on that occasion. And these two mantras were like literally, I don't know how else to say it other than they were like installed in my psyche. It was like they were imprinted, and they were given to me to always remember, like no matter what. And they are: trust the process, all is in divine order. And I mean, I've worked with yoga for many years, and I know many different fancy fun languages. It was just like they had to come through in plain English, and they're words that could be seen as cliche, but the way that they were like put into my psyche, it was just so powerful. And from that first moment in the pyramid, which was October 15th, 2018, I've been on this like crazy kind of dark night of the soul where almost every single aspect of my life got flipped upside down. Like I ended my marriage, and I moved homes twice, and just so many things with my work and my community, and then unfulfilled love, and just so many layers, so many pieces. And those mantras, trust the process, all is in divine order, have been like the lifeline for me through this great journey into the void, where I basically, every time I thought I had stripped down, I found there was a whole new layer to like dissolve and let pieces of self go, to the point where there was nothing else to let go of, so in that journey, as I've found myself rising up out of the other side of that death into like a true kind of phoenix moment of coming out of the ash, I have this newfound appreciation for just really sinking into the right timing of everything, and trusting in a way where even if my brain is questioning or I'm feeling impatient, I'm always reminding myself that there's a greater picture at hand, and that when I can really lean into that trust, I allow that magic to also move through me instead of trying to force things. And so it's been a real profound experience. And I kind of glazed over many details, in the interest of time and all the things. But, when I say a dark night of the soul, it's it's been a real kind of deal experience, whereas like just having to face death after death and loss after loss. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that. Just that the loss and the grief and the dark nights of the soul and how messy and painful they can be, but there is such freedom usually on the other side. There's an alchemization into more truth. And I so resonate with that when you think there's nothing left, like that it's been the darkest night and, I'm good. And then nope, there's another layer.
There's more to give.
More to give. And that trust in the process. And I think as a collective, that's so important right now. Like there is a divine will that is being orchestrated in this moment. And we just have to trust in this process that, it's all for our greatest good. How do you experience the mysteries?
On the daily. I mean, my love of the mysteries are just so intrinsic to who I am and who I'm becoming every single moment of every single day. It's like, I was laughing at myself today because usually, Monday, I mean, I've like got a particular rhythm and I'm doing certain admin things and then perhaps sitting with clients, and I'm like out there digging in the dirt, like trying to get like blueberry bushes in the ground. And then I walked in the door and I'm like, of course that's what I'm doing the day before the total lunar eclipse in Taurus, which is all about connection to the earth and Venus and the land. And like, it was really important I got these bushes over here because there's like a potential abundance of apples and strawberries and raspberries and blueberries and roses and rosemary, so many medicinals that are such a part of my work and what I create as actual medicine, but also energetic medicine. So I use that as an example, meaning like, it was not in my plans to be doing that today, but it ended up having to be. And that's part of being in the mystery, is like really being open to the call of spirit, and like being willing to reorient as we need to, and following the flow of energy, which I think is also very much related to the dragon currents. Because when we think about the ley lines of the earth and our energy and the energy of the other world, the more we can flow with that instead of trying to flow with our left brain thinking, our cognitive mind, then we really can be in the mystery. The mystery is that feminine yin space of potential and birth and life and death and all of the cycles and circles.
Beautiful. How do you root into the self?
Yeah, I love just like really simple practices of breathing into my body and feeling myself from the base of my spine to the crown of my head, and just calling my full higher self, my truth self, to be completely present in my physical body. Like I can do that, in a second. And that to me has been the most game-changing practice. That, and also like putting my hands and my feet on the earth every single day and just grounding in and feeling my heart connect to the earth's heart.
Yeah. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to add to this beautiful conversation? Any offerings that you have coming up, or anything at all that's on your heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that we can all awaken our eternal optimist, I think, the more magic we can weave here on this earth. And I think that the more that we can lean into our creativity and our gifts, knowing that all humans are creative, it's our nature. And however we can offer those to the world from a place of like true love, that is such a gift for these times. And awakening, each one of us awakening to our own unique medicine is a key part of that journey. So I am going to be offering my Skywalkers, which is a Foundations in Astrology course. That's going to start on the 22nd of November, but I don't know when you'll be sharing this. I don't know if it'll be before or after.
I think it'll be before.
Okay. So right if people are interested, they might want to check that out. And they could go to my website, earthseedtemplearts.com, and learn more about that. And I'm always available for one-on-one divination sessions. And I have my own podcast, which I've recently kind of transformed it into shorter. They're like short weekly transmissions on the current astrology. So if people are looking for a way to stay kind of connected to the pulse of the current astrology, it's called Stars, Stones, and Stories. And that can be a way for them to tune in to that energy.
Beautiful. I love that. Stars, Stones, and Stories. That sounds magical.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not your typical like interview style podcast, which I love those, as well. I just knew that I was to make something different. And they used to be very long ceremonial podcasts with guided meditations and so many things. And I did like 63 episodes of those, but I've now kind of transformed it. And I have a membership group where I offer the longer ones, but I'm offering these weekly short ones because I realized time is not, not everyone has a lot of time. But if I can keep it under 20 minutes, a lot of people can listen for like 10, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. It'll be in the show notes where everybody can reach out to you and listen and tune in and experience your magic. So thank you so much for this beautiful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been great to sit with you and get to feel your energy a little bit as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. And I will see you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.